Hey you guys, I'm back, and this is iGo to Dingo World, Chapter 2, Part 1. Starting the timer now, and let's begin. Fate was not kind to Spencer's dear friend, Mr. Mailbox. The next day after Sam had kindly delivered their mail, the elder Shay discovered that day's store of letters on his front doorstep. Thinking this must just have been courtesy of the postmaster for keeping such a clean and cheerful-looking mailbox all these years, Spencer simply kindly accepted this new fact with no suspicion whatsoever. So he took a break from visiting Mr. Mailbox. He did, however, grow suspicious when a letter from said postmaster was taped to his door a day after, stating that he should really consider repairing his letterbox. Curiously, Spencer journeyed down to the lobby. Now he was concerned. He was so concerned, in fact, that he was able to drown out both Lubert's shrill screams and one of Chuck's deadly piercing glares as he raced to where the pillar boxes lay. Once there, he looked to the Shay's 8C letterbox and found nothing. No, literally, he found nothing. Where his old friend Mr. Mailbox used to wait every day for him rested a gaping hole of emptiness, which is exactly what Spencer's mouth became as he stared at the spot, awestruck. Just then, the blonde culprit entered Bushwell Plaza, blissfully unaware of the silent shock happening just feet away from her. The only thing to bring Spencer out of his trance was a shrill cry from Lubert. "Cooties in my lobby! Nyah!" The elder Shay sibling turned to the girl, mouth still a gaping black hole, but eyes narrowed in anger and disappointment. So he looked sort of like this. Yeah. Even though she had not been facing him at the time, as if the glance bore through her very soul, Sam turned to face Spencer, a look of shock of her own on her face. "Dude, what's up?" "What did you do?" cried Spencer in near hysterics. Sam raised a curious eyebrow and gave a half tilt of her head. "You're gonna have to be more specific than that, Spence." "With the mailbox!" "More specific," she said, leaning on her left hip while crossing her arms over her chest. "Our mailbox!" the artist yelled, not a hint of sanity left in his tone. "Oh." Spencer's face turned even more incredulous and frantic. "How many other mailboxes do you defile?" Sam shrugged lightly. "Tons." The sculptor gasped heavily. "Relax," commanded the blonde. "I usually just stick a cherry bomb in him and let him blow." Spencer's mouth seemed to open even wider in horror as he pressed up against the wall, clinging to the spot where his old friend once called home, protectively. "Monster!" he hissed. "Oh, calm down," Sam said with a roll of her eyes. "Why did you break our mailbox?" questioned Spencer, voice still far too high to sound rational or reasonable. "It was blocking the mail," shrugged the present co-host of iCarly. The older of the Shay siblings just stared in silent shock at his sister's best friend. Sam had done some insane things, and it was never out of the question that she would do anything like this. Still, he found it alarming. Sam's eyebrows suddenly lowered, as she was obviously offended. "I didn't have to go out of my way to get your mail for you, you know." "That's right!" Spencer called, an insane, humorless smile lighting his features as he made a few exaggerated movements. "You didn't! So why did you?" "I was trying to be nice," Sam yelled. After a moment of tense silence, she sighed and gave another roll of her eyes. Spencer obviously was going to remain unreasonable today, so it was clear she'd have to budge this time to make things right. Or at least right in the eyes of her second family. "Look, if it makes you feel better, the mailbox will be back before we leave for Florida." More exaggerated movements. "How can you know that?" "I just do, okay?" she shouted, angered once more. "Now quit bugging me or things are going to stay the way they are." And with that, Sam exited up through the elevator to visit Carly. Spencer turned back to the letter drop, and just after exhaling a huff of air, gave a loud scream of frustration. "No emotional conflict in my lobby! Grah!" So, after an event like that, one could imagine Spencer's delight when he arrived downstairs the day the group of friends was about to embark on their vacation to a completely repaired post box. One word had to mess up that whole sentence. "Mr. Mailbox!" Spencer exclaimed giddily as he ran to the box and pressed his cheek against it affectionately. Yeah, Sam muttered, her bored eyes facing away from the scene as she swung her key ring around her finger. "Let's just get ready to go, okay?" The blonde had not been in the mood for praise. As it was 4:30 in the morning, and Sam Puckett was not a morning person. In fact, it was an oddity that she was even awake at all at this time. And the only reason for that was because Carly decided to spend the night for a change at Sam's house, so that she would be able to make sure personally that her best friend upheld her responsibilities. Carly stood at the blonde's right side, beaming at the success of her plan. With the younger Shay's careful preparation, the whole vacation was sure to go off without a hitch. Hey, but then there was that little detail that always made things a bit unpredictable. Freddie was, after all, also going to be on this trip. It was almost impossible to tell what Sam would do when Freddie was present, and vice versa. The two just seemed to be all for surprising each other. Or trying to, at least. Truth be told, they rather surprised the people around them much more than each other with the choices they made when both were in attendance. So, the tech producer raised a curious eyebrow. Before I left, my mom told me to remember to get checked out every day. And call me crazy, but I don't think she was talking about by girls. Carly laughed nervously from her position, letting her head lower to the side, her hair falling in front of her face, and her hand raising to further shield herself from her neighbor's scrutinizing gaze. Sam shrugged. Okay, you're crazy. Freddie's face, which now wore an all-too-familiar Sam-induced glare, immediately shot to the blonde. And duh, she didn't mean by girls. I mean, your mom's a nutjob, but I don't think even she's that delusional. Girls do check me out, Sam, he retorted. Freddie, unlike Sam, was a morning person, but you wouldn't guess that in this particular instance. On what planet? Scoffed the web comedian. His glare grew tighter. Earth, he answered darkly. And on what planet do the male versions of whatever species you're from check you out? First of all, that was the worst comeback I've ever heard, Sam replied simply as she shook her head. Second, if you wanted a ride to Florida tied to the roof of the car, why didn't you just ask, Freddie? Growling, Freddie rolled his eyes and returned his attention to Carly. He had been much more likely to get answers out of her rather than an arrogant and irritable blonde someone. So, do you know anything about this? Carly's head snapped up, a nervous look painted across her face. What? Me? No, she answered hurriedly as her eyes darted wildly around the lobby. I don't know anything at all, except for the fact that in some states it's actually illegal to go skydiving with your pet moose. Did you know that? The tech producer's glance switched to one that was very reminiscent of Sam's, bored and impatient. No, was the only answer he gave, and it was delivered in a harsh tone. It was obvious that his first fight of the day, which Sam made perfectly clear that he had lost, had left him in a bad mood. The brunette frowned. Not too subtle, huh? Psh! Spencer exclaimed from where he still stood, still slumped over with his cheek resting against the pillar box. Even Mr. Mailbox knows something is up. And he's inanimate, he said as he straightened, patting the box warmly on its surface. And then a look of pain took over his features. Ah! Backache! Backache! Carly, called Freddie, his tone much more subdued and understanding now. Do you know anything about what's going on? It wasn't just his tone that was softer, but his face as well. His eyebrows were arched, pleading. And even though Carly felt no romantic connection with her technical producer, she still couldn't lie to that face. Her number one weakness was puppy dog eyes. She couldn't deny them when anyone cast them upon her. God forbid she ever had children. They would have the incentive to walk all over her, the poor girl. The brunette's face melted into a frown before she snapped her eyes shut tight and spit out, I lied to her and told her we were going to a stupid health clinic in Miami, okay? Freddie gasped in horror, almost mirroring the face Spencer first made upon seeing Sam once discovering the mailbox was broken. No, no! Carly shouted, hands flying out in front of her face as she frantically shook her head. It's okay! She doesn't know! She will now, Sam chimed in from the corner where she was leaning on the lobby wall. Her eyes were concentrated on the nail she was picking on her left hand. The lady has ears like a bat. Oh God, Carly, she's right! Yelled Freddie, whipping around to face the stairs in panic. Calm down, the web star called pleadingly. She can't hear us from all the way up on the 8th floor. I bet $1,000,000 on it. A shrill, neurotic shout suddenly rang through the stairwell. Freddie! Looks like you owe someone $1,000,000, stated Sam apathetically, her eyes still on the nail. They narrowed, and she stuck her tongue out in determination as she completed whatever task she was attempting to do with her cuticle. Freddie's eyes were glued to the stairs, his chest heaving with fright. They were all about to face the wrath of a lied-to Mrs. Benson. Oh, that's the end of part 1. I guess I'll see you guys for part 2, and I'll try not to end so abruptly next time.